Previously on the American Justice Podcast.
Do you know how to work a broom?
Yes.
And a dustpan?
Yes.
Do you know how to fill trash bags?
Yes.
So if you had wanted to gain access to those stalls, you could have done it.
Taking everything out and going through every single thing, it's possible.
Did you see anything in there that would have made it physically impossible for you to inventory the contents of the barn October 22nd, 2005?
I don't believe it could have all been done on October, on that specific day.
Okay. It may have taken a day or two, correct?
Yes.
There is an epidemic in America's criminal justice system. The prosecution and conviction of innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Welcome to American Justice. The American Justice Podcast Army works to free men and women wronged by the criminal justice system. It's not only about the innocent who have been imprisoned, but also the victims of the crimes as well. No one deserves justice more than them. And now, here's your host, Scott Pogensey.
Hello, AJ Army. Welcome back to your podcast. I want to start off by saying that I understand sometimes it seems like we're getting deep into these subjects, and that's probably because we really are. This case is very complicated, and there are lots of twists and turns that lead us down so many different roads. But for those of you that stick with me through this whole season, I think you'll understand why this story needs to be told. My appreciation for my AJ Army is beyond words, and hopefully, together, we can solve this horrendous crime. Last week, we spent an exhaustive amount of time on Brandon's timeline, where he said he was, why he said it, and how we could show his actual whereabouts by the limited phone records that were turned over to the defense. So you've had a week to think about that. Did you make up your mind to determine if you felt like Brandon could do all of the things that the actual killer had to do in just 14 minutes? Did everyone comment the number that they came up with before I revealed the 14 minutes? Please send in your comments to Facebook or YouTube, voicemail or email, and let me know your thoughts. I'm wanting to know what you guys really think. To me, personally, I just couldn't even imagine him doing all of that with such precision in just 14 minutes. But that's just me. Let me know what you think. I look forward to hearing all of the comments. This week, we are going to finish up with Brandon's interrogation by the hands or words of Ranger Collins. Once Brandon finished going over his initial timeline, the pair moved on to other subjects. One of those subjects was whether or not Brandon would submit to giving Ranger Collins his DNA sample through some buccal swabs. It struck me odd when I first watched this clip that I'm about to show you. Ranger Collins asks Brandon if he'll give him a DNA sample, and it almost seemed like he was even nervous to ask. And the other odd thing about it was how fast Brandon agreed to give the sample. He said yes before Ranger Collins even got the full question out. Another one of those odd things when you're sitting there staring at a stone-cold killer right in the face, no? Let me know what you think. Here it is.
And this is something that we did with your sister, and of course, I mean, I'm going to ask that you'll do it, but is to give us buccal swabs, DNA samples, because if we find DNA at the scene and we don't know whose it is, it's not your parents, then since you've been in the house, that will help us say, well, we know where that DNA came from.
Yeah, naturally yours is going to be at the scene, so, but we're trying to eliminate somebody that's not supposed to be in there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's totally fine.
Okay.
Did you catch it? Ranger Collins says buccal swabs, DNA, and before he can even get the word sample out, Brandon says, "No, that's fine. Here, let me play it for you again." It's difficult to pick up on the almost unusable recording equipment they had back in 2005. Here you go.
And this is something that we did with your sister, and of course, I mean, I'm going to ask that you'll do it, but is to give us buccal swabs, DNA samples, because if we find DNA at the scene and we don't know whose it is, it's not your parents, then since you've been in the house, that will help us say, well, we know where that DNA came from.
Yeah, naturally yours is going to be the same, so, but we're trying to eliminate somebody that's not supposed to be in there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's totally fine.
Okay.
So what did you think? Is it odd for a guilty person to be so forthcoming with their DNA sample? Of course it is. I've watched a lot of true crime in my life, and I have yet to see a guilty person blurt out during a police interrogation something like, "Yes, here's my DNA, take it." Yet Ranger Collins never either paid any attention to those subtle cues or just never cared. One or the other. Still, because Brandon had visited the home and cleaned up in there before going to the club that Sunday night, the investigators asked for a DNA sample to distinguish Brandon's from any others that they were likely to find during the remainder of the investigation. Needless to say, Brandon agrees readily. Think about this. Why would a quote-unquote killer offer up a DNA sample so quickly? To generalize and not be too technical about the whole subject, DNA is some tricky stuff. All of us leave it all over the place on a daily basis without even thinking about it. If Brandon had been in Dennis and Norma's home, committed the murders, and cleaned up, surely there would have been traces of his DNA at the crime scene. Tons of it. DNA wasn't a fairly new breakthrough in 2005, and even if you weren't a Law and Order buff back then, you still knew what it was and that if they found any of yours, it was pretty much game over. It was spoken about nightly on the news and was mentioned casually in tons of movies and television shows. There was no way to avoid the knowledge of DNA evidence, even if you're one of those people who didn't partake in a regular television series or weekly trip to the movie theater. Bottom line, everyone knew about DNA evidence and what it was capable of in 2005. It was the slam dunk finding. It was the be-all, end-all discovery in any criminal case. Why would a killer offer a sample so quickly? There is only one possible answer: to assist the case in moving along and bringing the real killer or killers to justice. He just wanted to help. Normally, guilty people don't offer assistance. If they do, they don't offer without some coaxing, maybe begging. Threatening is the last resort method. Ranger Collins didn't need to coax, beg, or threaten. Brandon offered. Damn near insisted. All right, so let's get going with the remainder of the interrogation. Ranger Collins explains that now that they have Brandon's timeline established, they can go on with those questions they'd mentioned at the beginning of the interview. Ranger Collins and Investigator Jones wanted to know what kind of family the Woodruffs were. In a complete contradiction to the information Charla Woodruff gave in her interview, Brandon paints a picture of love and understanding, support and caring. His parents were the kind of people who would do anything for him and always be there to assist if he was ever in a bind. There's absolutely no mention of abuse or violence like his sister Charla had claimed. As a matter of observation, Brandon's description is more about the wonderful things experienced in his family than a woeful tale of sorrow previously claimed by his sibling. He even goes on to add that his sister Charla had some problems in the past with drugs and suicide attempts, but claims that she got better. His description of her is one of overcoming adversity and hope. He speaks of his sister as though he's a fan of her success and her drive and life altogether. It's too bad that she didn't offer him the same courtesy during her time in the interview room. You know what? Let me just let Brandon tell you what he thought of his parents. Here's how Brandon responded when Ranger Collins brought up the subject of his parents' relationships with each other and with Brandon and his sister.
Can you tell me what kind of relationship or what kind of parents were your parents?
Like, to me and my sister?
Mm-hmm.
The best.
Were they?
Like, honestly, like, I can honestly say, like, in my 19 years of, like, being with my parents, that, like, they were always there with us, like, always.
Okay.
And, like, if I was at a horse show or I needed them at 3 a.m. to wake up because I didn't feel comfortable pulling the trailer, they were right there. Like, if I got into a bind, money-wise, anything like that, they're there. Like, and anybody that knows my parents in my town or knows me knows that, like, me, my parents, and my sister are, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they wouldn't have to second guess my parents' decisions on anything. So, that's, like, I don't know if words could explain, like, what my parents were. Because, like, they're not something you see. I mean, they're married over 20-something years. I mean, I have, not one of my friends has parents like that.
Okay. And was their relationship a very loving relationship? I mean,
yeah,
they were very close?
Yeah, like, they always did, like, I thought it was gross. They would always do all that, like,
that's your parents,
stuff and all that stuff. But, they're always, like, they were always together, like, always. Okay. So, and, like, if my mom needed something, like, my dad would do it. Like, I can honestly say I've never seen them once fight. Ever. Really? I've never seen them fight. They might argue, like, say, oh, I don't think we should do this today, but because I want to go to a horse sale or something, something stupid like that.
Okay, but you're talking. They didn't argue.
I'm talking about, like, an argument. I've never seen my parents argue ever.
Okay. Did your parents ever abuse you or your sister?
No.
Never abusive at all?
No, my sister was abused, like, when she was little. Mm-hmm. And if anything, my parents, like, did anything and everything they could to, like, take care of them.
How was she abused? Who abused her?
We don't know. That's still, the police are still doing that to this day, I think.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So. But you never were abused? Were they, at least disciplinarians or anything?
Yeah, to an extent, like, over the past couple of years, I think I felt, like, real comfortable. Mm-hmm. Because, like, even though I might make a bad decision, like, they would be there to say I made that bad decision. But at the same time, I take after my dad a lot. At the same time, family means most right now. You know what I'm saying? Right. So, like, if he tells me that, yeah, that's wrong, my dad still got my back. Even though it was wrong, my dad still had my back. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that's how they always were. Okay. And sexually abused? Never been sexually abused by either one of your parents? Mm-hmm. Okay. And your sister too, right? No. Oh, no. Okay. I mean, they were like I said, like, I don't know of a lot of people that have parents like we do. Okay.
I mean, let's be real here. Does this really sound like someone that hated his parents so much that he couldn't help himself from extinguishing their last breaths from their bodies? I mean, Brandon describes his parents as so close that he found it to be sometimes gross. Do any of you remember being a kid with lovey-dovey parents? Remember how you felt when they would show emotion toward one another in a public place? You couldn't even grab a couple slices at the local Pizza Hut on a Saturday night without the two of them pecking at each other at the salad bar or holding hands as they were being led to their seat. Do you remember looking all around at the other guests, hoping that no one saw the disgusting, quote, older couple behave like school kids? Do you remember laying in a bed afterward praying the creaks of your childhood home were not being caused by the two of them on the other side of your bedroom wall? My intention wasn't to disgust you or send you mentally running, possibly screaming down memory lane, but you get the idea. Some more than others, but that's the kind of couple that Dennis and Norma Woodruff were. They loved each other and didn't care who knew. Nothing to hide. They never fought, and if by chance they did, they had respect enough to never reveal it to Charla and Brandon. He claimed absolutely no mental, physical, or sexual abuse at the hands of his parents. Yes, these are some of the embarrassing questions, but they just had to be asked. Then, as an interruption to the meat and potatoes of the investigation, the interview is sidelined by talk of horses. Horses, 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 for pages upon end. As I said before, I'm a Southern California kid that was brought to Texas kicking and screaming by his parents. I'd much rather be out on the waves of the Pacific with the midnight moon glowing overhead than be in a barn with some stinky horses. But Brandon loved riding and training and showing his horses. And Investigator Terry Jones, a cowboy through and through, carries on the conversation while Ranger Collins steps into the hallway to make a phone call. I mean, that makes sense, right? You've got your prime suspect in a double homicide, capital murder investigation sitting right there in front of you. Why not step into the hallway to see if the wife needs some milk and bread on the way home, right? Well, we don't know that that's what the conversation was about, but I find it difficult to think of many other things that would be more important than the task at hand. While Ranger Collins is out getting the grocery list, Terry Jones and Brandon are chumming it up inside the interrogation room. It reads as though they were bonding, but I'm assuming this was nothing more than just a tactic to soften the blow of what's coming. Investigator Jones inquires about Brandon's hair and, to him, a peculiar style of dress. Brandon tells him that he's been receiving clothes and hair treatments in return for modeling for several businesses and brands. Eventually, Ranger Collins returns to the room and the line of questioning returns to the subject at hand. Brandon again claims that his parents were not abusive, they were not having an affair on each other, and they were not swingers. Yes, Ranger Collins really asked if they were swingers. Brandon did, however, notice one thing that he thought to be odd while at the home the last day of their lives: a gun. You see, Brandon's father hadn't owned a gun since Charla's suicide attempts a few years back. I mean, his parents were more like computer geeks than gun owners. As a matter of fact, Dennis Woodruff was so entirely against guns that he had never even taught his own son how to handle or operate a gun. This, ladies and gentlemen, is almost a stoning offense in the southern part of the United States. Fathers take pride in the day that their son is old enough to take a stroll through the back 40, or a friend's or neighbor's back 40, and fire off a few rounds. For some dads in Texas, that age could be as early as 5 or 6. But for some other more cautious fathers out there, their son could be as old as, say, 7. All kidding aside, it is almost considered a rite of passage for most that has carried on through generations. Not every father, mind you, but definitely a majority. But that was how hell-bent Dennis Woodruff was on the subject of guns. He never shared the experience of the burning scent of spent gunpowder with his only son. To him, it wasn't worth the potential harm it could cause his daughter. It was yet another undeniable sign of ultimate love for Charla. One which obviously went unnoticed during her descriptions of the man. Unnoticed or ignored. Possibly uncomprehended. Anyway, the neighbors of the Royce City home had already warned the Woodruffs of some criminal activity in the neighborhood upon their arrival to the new home. This caused Brandon to feel uneasy during the few times that he'd visited after the move. It was enough to make him never want to stay the night there. Now, there was a gun in the house. Brandon stated that the area his parents had moved to made him nervous. He was used to being in a place like the Heath home where they'd never had to worry about such things and kept their doors unlocked most of the time. The investigators claimed that they'd discovered a shotgun shell near the front porch of the house. Brandon hadn't the slightest idea where that came from. Oh yes, the shotgun shells. Oh man, so much evidence not processed at the crime scene. But we'll have to save that for a future episode. I mean, your victims were shot several times. Why bother investigating some shotgun shells found outside? Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see. Now, remember the shit kickers? Of course you do. How could you forget a pack of boys who are commonly referred to as the shit kickers? I even bet that a few of you have begun to use this old and forgotten term to describe someone in your own life after listening to this podcast. You're welcome. Together, maybe we can bring this designation back into our daily vocabularies. Anyway, the shit kickers are back. Brandon explains that he'd gotten in a fight in school with Joseph Hageman, shit kicker number 2, and that they'd both been placed on probation because of it. He goes on to reveal that his former group of friends had turned on him during his senior year at Rockwall High School, including Hageman, Mike Etherington, and Dustin Perry. They were having a hard time dealing with his new lifestyle and interests. Brandon then stopped short and told Ranger Collins that he's not the kind of person to talk bad about people. I mean, here's Brandon talking to the police trying to figure out who killed his parents. Here's a guy that, as you'll learn later on, has made Brandon's life a living hell. And he's not wanting to talk bad about him? Wow, that's noble. If anyone killed my parents, I'm telling every secret any friend has ever told me in hopes of finding the person or people that did it. Sorry to all my friends out there. Both of you are going to be upset when you hear that. But here's what Brandon said initially about Mike. Quote, I know stuff about Mike that not a lot of people know about Mike, but I'm not the kind of guy that's going to tattletale or anything. I'm the type of guy that says, you know what? You're doing things I don't approve of. You're doing things I don't want to be caught up in. See you later." End quote. But then Ranger Collins asks Brandon to elaborate on Mike. I think it was then that Brandon realized, you know what? I don't like to think Mike had anything to do with this, but you never know. Maybe I should tell them everything I know, just in case. So luckily, Brandon then starts spilling the beans. He lets Ranger Collins know that several people in authority had warned him of the dangers of hanging out with the shit-kicker ringleader Mike Etherington, and claimed him to be a bad seed, a thief, an instigator. Brandon let Ranger Collins know that Mike had claimed that Brandon's show horses were on drugs and forced him to have them tested during a competition. Results of those tests, by the way, all clean. Brandon continued that it had also been rumored that Etherington was responsible for the death of more of Brandon's show animals and even the family's $3,000 show dog by antifreeze poisoning. Remember Charla's claim of Brandon's animal abuse from the previous episodes? You guessed it. Turns out Brandon and several other people suspected it was actually Mike Etherington. The number one person that suspected Mike? You guessed it, Dennis Woodruff. Brandon then goes on to tell Ranger Collins about all of the threatening text messages that Mike had sent him just a couple weeks prior. Remember those from episode 3? Well, in case you don't, here they are. Mike starts us off.
I've moved up in life since high school. Watch what you say. Sincerely, Mike Etherington. Remember that name. You'll need it someday.
Really? That's cool and everything. Oh wait, did you finally get to afford a cell phone? Aw, that's real cute, but you're still just trash.
Yeah, now I'm 18. I can have my own cell account, not my mom's. Learn to pay your own way. It's called growing up.
You know what proves my point? You still think about me or you wouldn't have called 3 times. Poor Mike, I don't think you understand. I've been through with your little flesh for a while now. Get over me. It's okay, Mike Etherington. You don't have to be jealous anymore. Look at yourself. Come on, are you still in high school? Well, I'm 19, okay? So, who cares?
Hey, answer your phone like an adult.
You don't make any sense, so please stop. You're only proving you're stupid. Now, I hope you have a good life. I'm gonna stop wasting my time on you, okay? Thanks for the entertainment, though. Maybe you and Perry should get together and make more stuff up. It makes me laugh to know y'all think about me so much when I could care less about both of you. Seriously, y'all started this.
Well, I'm off to bed. Got a big future ahead and need to rest. Later.
Right, just admit you can't afford the text messages.
Suck a dick. 3 people have seen you and your boyfriend, so we know what we need to do.
You want to know what's funny? When that supposedly happened, my parents were here. Can't be 2 places at once.
I know people there, you idiot. Oh yeah, you know one of them. I think her name is Stephanie. She's in a class with you.
So that proves not a damn thing, actually. She and her friend, we all hang out. No, I'm not answering my phone to hear your annoying voice yell. Oh, since you know her, you should come see the next show next weekend. And guess who has a head role? Me. That's right, bitch.
Sing your little heart. I've heard all about it. It seems pretty gay. I think I'll stay here with my girlfriend. Thanks for the offer, but I don't swing that way.
Honestly, just quit because you're looking stupid. I know you saved up all month to text me, but come on, use the $2 or $3 and get Lindsay a greasy hamburger. Wow, you have a girlfriend? Do I get a prize for having one too? Maybe I'll get a better prize because my girlfriend is not only hotter, but she is classy.
Made no sense. Bye.
Real cute. Now you're even using my lines. Mike, your jealousness is starting to creep me out.
Wow. Quote, "Sincerely, Mike Etherington. Remember that name. You'll need it one day." End quote. Turns out, so do we. I wonder if that's what he's talking about. Anyway, Brandon even told Ranger Collins that he's no saint. He was honest with Ranger Collins and let him know that he had written back some pretty racy messages himself. But Mike saying things like, "Remember my name," and "We know all we need to know," and things like that, seems pretty ominous if you ask me. Maybe it's just a coincidence that Dennis and Norma Woodruff ended up dead just a couple weeks later. Maybe. Personally, several questions and what-ifs invade my mind at this point, but I refuse to lead anyone there. I'll let you come to those conclusions on your own. Honestly, we're here to look at the facts rather than speculate, but my, how the tables have turned from one interview to the next. So Brandon goes on to tell Ranger Collins that Mike had also been visiting Brandon's girlfriend Morgan Lee while Brandon was away at college, and even blowing up his cell phone since the death of his parents in pure small-town bully fashion. Brandon claimed that Mike Etherington was a pure salesman. Whatever he said, people believed. Even Brandon's extended family had mentioned Etherington as a potential person of interest to both Brandon and the investigators. Aunt Linda, Aunt Kathy, and even to a small extent, Charla herself had told Ranger Collins not to let Brandon forget to tell him all about Mike Etherington. So yes, they all mentioned Mike, but the investigators seemed to forget. I can assure you that, here at the American Justice Podcast, we have not forgotten. Uh-oh. That sounds like it's a perfect cue for a patent-pending Scott Pogansy personal opinion. I feel like we have to have one at least once a week, huh? Okay, here we go. We can only hope this undeserved and recently rediscovered fame will get Mike a pat on the back from his drinking buddies or a once-in-a-while complimentary celebratory soda at the Texas Roadhouse on Friday nights. Kidding, of course. Mostly. But what I really hope for is that someone with a badge in good old Hunt County is listening weekly and taking into account that this gentleman should be a person of interest. Again, it is not the position of Atua Productions, the American Justice Podcast, or its host that Mike had anything to do with the murders of Dennis and Norma Woodruff. I am merely pointing out the suspicious stuff that should have made someone look his way a little harder. But there are lots of people out there that should be looked at harder. Doesn't mean they did it. Doesn't mean they didn't do it. Just means that there are actions, words, and circumstances that, in my opinion, should have been looked at closer. Maybe someone will look his way the next time something heinous occurs in his neighborhood. Maybe his vehicle will be searched a little more thoroughly the next time he's pulled over and issued a speeding citation. Maybe he'll agree to come on the show and explain everything. Maybe. I know. Wish in one hand, crap in the other, right? Okay, back to the interview. At this point, Brandon couldn't say 100% that the shit-kicker crew or the mystery barn builder or the rumored bad neighbors had anything to do with his parents' death, so he never bothered to point a finger in either of those directions. Not to worry, the Texas Rangers and the Hunt County Sheriff's Department were about to point major fingers at someone else. 90 minutes of mixed questioning, ignorance of potential suspects, and some horse lingo later, the bomb is dropped in the blink of an eye. So here we are. Ranger Collins and Terry Jones are staring down the person that they have come to believe killed Dennis and Norma Woodruff. They've gotten all the pleasantries out of the way. Where he was, how many horses you can fit into a 20-acre pasture, the usual. And now it's time. Ranger Collins is ready to inform Brandon that he is a suspect. Charla's first woe is me interview and testimony from a neighbor in Heath, the one who couldn't even remember anyone's name, stating that he'd witnessed Brandon at the Heath house between 10 and 11 p.m., now puts the 19-year-old college freshman at the top of their list. The way it goes down is like this. As Brandon finishes up telling the Keystone cops about Mike, they come back and say, "Okay, well, do you have any suspects yourself?" Now, if you're a guilty person, you're going to say, "Well, yeah, of course I do. It was Johnny down the street, or Billy a few streets over, or Sammy from school, etc." I would think a guilty person would have all kinds of other people they should be looking at. Not Brandon. Brandon has no clue. But Ranger Collins has a clue. Only problem is that his clue is formed by opinion and hearsay, and not facts. Oh, and of course there's the obligatory Terry Jones begging Brandon to, quote, tell the truth. Here's how it goes down. Let's talk about it on the other side.
That Mike can go out and do things until, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I just know that like, I don't appreciate him calling me, you know, and I don't appreciate it. And what's funny is that I didn't know my grandparents and my aunts and uncles knew about him, but apparently my dad himself has told them, because my grandma was like, you know, families speculate, obviously.
Sure.
And they were like, well, what about that boy? And I was like, how did you know about that? But for my dad to actually involve my family in anything means that my dad had a concern about something.
Okay. And so that leads me to this question is, you know, do you suspect anybody of this?
Honestly, I don't, because in my own opinion, I don't know how any human could do something. Like, I think a freak would have to do this. Like, I don't know how any human is capable of taking another human's life. I think it's unnatural. I think that we are not set here on earth. Like, I'm very, I've got, like, my faith with me, you know?
I understand that.
I understand that.
And let me tell you, I agree with you 110% as far as that's not natural, but you go all the way back into Genesis with Cain and Abel, and it started then, and it hadn't stopped now. Right. I mean, it happens every day.
I just know that, I would hope so much that somebody like him wouldn't do that, you know? Am I going to say that I know 100% he didn't, or that I don't think he did, or whatever? I don't know, because I have 500 questions that I don't know, you know? Right. I still don't even know how my parents died.
Well, and I don't know that we're going to be able to get into that right now, because that was one of those things that, and I've already explained to the other family members, is there are certain parts of the investigation that if we tell family and then we catch somebody, you know, 6 months down the line or whatever, okay, that when in court time comes, we're going to be said, well, you told the family and the family told them, and that's how they knew something that, you know, had occurred inside. So we're doing that for the integrity of the full investigation. It's not because we're trying to withhold anything from y'all, but the investigation has to have integrity.
And listen, okay, I'm straight up. I told you earlier, okay. I see kids that love their parents. I'm not saying you did anything, but I've seen kids that love their parents and to death, and stuff happens, okay?
Right.
I mean, I know. I mean, right. And if anything was to happen, if you was twisted off, because I know that I was talking to your sister, and there is some stuff that says maybe there's some mental history, your family, some stress issues. She's taking some stuff. I think she says that maybe your dad or something, you know, she might have known, you know, he would get bent out of shape sometimes, and you know, people do that, okay? Right. I told her, I asked about you, and she said she didn't think that you'd ever really taken anything, but the thing is, it's a lot of times, until you get older, it's like your dad. He probably wouldn't admit it at a younger age because it's a man thing. Women are real good about men. But if anything has happened, because this is serious, what's going on? I understand. And you're talking about, you know, saying something here's happened, here's what happened, I didn't mean to, I've been scared or whatever. If you did it,
But here's the thing, though. With your representation,
right.
because you've got people that come with you, and I remember that your dad sat there and said, Brandon, that's the first thing that he told you is, whatever you tell them, you need to tell them the truth.
Right, no,
right?
that's the truth, and I don't know how you're saying that there's
Well, there's huge inconsistencies I'll tell you right now, I've got an eyewitness that saw you and Heath at 11 p.m. on Sunday night. Between 10 and 11 p.m. at the Heath residence, and you're putting yourself at a club in Dallas or at Alex's home, leaving between 11 and 11:15, and Brandon, let me tell you, it's impossible. You can't be. That's our question.
But
you can't be two places.
How can 3 of my friends say that I was with them?
You know what? We haven't talked to your friends yet. But here's the thing, Brandon, okay? You threw out before over in Heath, man, I know all my neighbors and all my neighbors know me. And I'm telling you right now that a neighbor has contacted us and said on Sunday night, and I know it was Sunday night, and I know it was between 10 and 11 p.m. That's as far as I can get it narrowed down. I saw Brandon at the Heath address, and now all of a sudden you've told us this whole story about where you are and where you should be, and that's the question that we've got. How can you be two places at once?
Brandon, before anybody, what I was fixing to say was if anybody can step up for you, if something's happened, and step up and say there was a problem, because evidently there was, okay, if it happened. If anybody can do that instead of, you're talking about a capital offense.
No, I know, but what I'm telling you
is
I cannot be in Denton.
I agree with that 100%. I'm there with you.
But I don't know how they could say they saw me because I was with all my friends.
Brandon, did anything happen with you and your parents?
No. That's the dead truth. No, that's crazy.
I know it, but I've seen crazy stuff happen. You have too. You've seen it on TV, everything, and kids that love their parents, and just something flies off, something snaps, okay? And if something did, and somebody knows it and is remorseful for it, that's a person that can be helped. If a person snaps and then lies about it, that's a person who knew it was wrong to begin with.
But what I'm saying is, I just want y'all to check out things.
Okay. We are going to check out.
What I'm saying is, I don't know how they can say that I was there if...
I'm asking you, Brandon, straight up, is if something happened with you and your parents, get right, and that's why you get help. If you don't, I'm going to tell you, they're going to go at you and think you're the biggest villain in the world because you've lied about it, and you're going to have motives, and you're going to have all this other crap, instead of saying, me and my parents got in an argument, something happened, I don't even know what happened, and something bad happened. If something did, that's okay.
So you're telling us straight up.
I'm telling you 100%.
You did not kill your parents.
No, that's fucking crazy.
Have you had? We've talked about the guns and stuff. Have you had anything like that in your possession in a while? Any kind of guns? Nothing.
I don't even know how to operate a gun.
Okay.
Seriously, that's crazy.
Well, I can tell you from experience, a gun's real easy to operate and pull the trigger.
But let me tell you right now, are y'all telling me that that's what was used?
We're not telling you anything. I'm just telling you a gun is easy to operate.
Okay, well, I'm telling you right now.
A gun in your possession.
I'm telling you right now. For one, there'd be no way in this world I would ever do anything to my parents. For number two, my dad is a big guy, okay? Mm-hmm. My dad would, and this is y'all basically telling me that a 19-year-old is going to go do something to his parents. That's fucking crazy.
Have you ever seen a 19-year-old do anything to his parents, though?
No.
Think about what you're saying. You've never seen kids.
You don't watch the news? My goodness,
and the reason why you're right, if anything was done to your dad, it'd be heads. A person that went heads up with him would have their hands full, wouldn't he?
Yeah, they would.
But a person that he trusted, where he just relaxed and something happened to him quick, or they was in an argument, and he wasn't expecting anything, that would be the person that could hurt him easy. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I do, but
right.
Brandon, it wasn't a break-in.
It wasn't.
I'll tell you that right now.
Well,
I'll tell you that. So you've already been told that.
Right.
Okay. House was secured. It wasn't a break-in. Okay.
Right.
All right. No struggle whatsoever.
None.
What?
At all.
Well, except for the signs of a struggle with his mom, defensive wounds, someone else's hair in her hands, etc. But there you have it. Brandon repeatedly states that it's impossible to be in two places at once, and the investigators agree. But they believed nothing he said. Very quickly after this exchange, Brandon asks if he can leave, and the investigators tell him that he can. And he does. I just noticed something very odd while I was watching this clip again for editing, which I think was only my 50th time. But Brandon is sitting there literally being accused of murder, and his attorney just sat there, as I said before, like a potted plant. Just one more time that the system would let Brandon down. And we're only 5 days after the bodies were found at this point. Amazing. All right. So that wraps it up for the interrogation of Brandon Dale Woodruff. Thanks again for sticking with me. I know it seems like it's taking a long time to get through all of the information, but that's only because it is. And trust me, there's still a lot that we didn't even talk about. But I am definitely doing my best to bring to you the most interesting parts, the most important parts, and above all, the parts of this story that will help you get the full picture of how a 19-year-old college freshman could get sentenced to life without parole for something that he had no part in. All right, so according to Ranger Collins' investigative report, when Brandon walked out of the Hunt County Sheriff's Office, he walked blindly right into the crosshairs of Ranger Collins that he would never see coming. Since Ranger Collins just promised Brandon that he was going to look into his alibis and the toll records and the phone records, etc. Let's see how long that would take him. Okay, let's see here. Getting to those pages, hold on. Oops. Looks like it didn't take any time at all. Let's listen to how Ranger Collins describes the last minutes before he starts preparing the arrest warrant.
Ranger Sergeant Collins Investigative Report, Sections 4.130 to 4.132. After Investigator Jones stepped out of the interview room, Brandon Woodruff advised that Hunt County was just taking the easy way out to try and pin the murders of Dennis and Norma Woodruff on him. Ranger Sergeant Collins informed Brandon Woodruff that it was much harder to accuse a family member who had just lost their parents. Brandon Woodruff advised that, quote, "I can guarantee you that there's no way in hell that would ever happen," unquote. Attorney Leroy Autry entered the interview room and advised that it was time to go, to which Brandon Woodruff asked Ranger Sergeant Collins if it was all right for him to go with attorneys Leroy Autry and Ren Autry. Ranger Sergeant Collins advised Brandon Woodruff that he had always been free to leave. Brandon Woodruff and attorney Ren Autry left the interview room with attorney Leroy Autry. Ranger Sergeant Collins followed Brandon Woodruff and attorneys Leroy and Ren Autry to the lobby of the Hunt County Criminal Justice Center. Ranger Sergeant Collins was met at the door from the front lobby to the second area of the Hunt County Criminal Justice Center by Charla Woodruff and Linda Matthews, who started to tell Ranger Sergeant Collins that they suspected that Brandon Woodruff may have been involved, and started trying to tell Ranger Sergeant Collins about all of the strange things that Brandon Woodruff had done since the deaths of Dennis and Norma Woodruff. Ranger Sergeant Collins informed Charla Woodruff that because Charla Woodruff had come to the Hunt County Criminal Justice Center with representation, and because the attorneys who were there at the Criminal Justice Center with Charla and Brandon Woodruff were just on the other side of the secured door of the lobby, Ranger Sergeant Collins did not feel that it was proper for Ranger Sergeant Collins to get the information Charla Woodruff and Linda Matthews were attempting to provide at that particular time. Ranger Sergeant Collins provided Linda Matthews and Charla Woodruff with a business card and invited both of them to contact Ranger Sergeant Collins later with any information they may have. Both Matthews and Charla Woodruff agreed and left with the rest of the family. Ranger Sergeant Collins started preparing the affidavit for an arrest warrant of Brandon Woodruff.
Wait a cotton-picking minute here. Sorry, but my Texan side comes out when I get a little angry. Did Ranger Collins just say that because Charla's attorneys were right on the other side of the door, that he didn't feel comfortable talking to her anymore? And that here's a business card and you can wink, wink, nudge, nudge, come on back when you don't have the attorneys with you? What the hell? Oh my Lord. This just keeps getting worse. On October 24th, 2005, Ranger Jeffrey Collins placed the arrest warrant into the hands of Hunt County Magistrate Kenneth Peters. The state of Texas was now going to arrest Brandon Dale Woodruff for the charge of capital murder. Next week, we'll get into the arrest warrant itself, the information contained in it, and the reasoning behind each one. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, you will not want to miss this one. Here's a little hint. You can pile all of the physical evidence, the eyewitness testimony, and the DNA evidence contained in the arrest affidavit in one hand and a nickel in the other. I'll let you guess which one is worth more. Until next week, here's a little preview. Remember, as always, stay aware, stay strong, and get involved. See you next time.
Based on the facts listed above, affiant believes that enough probable cause exists for the issuance of an arrest warrant for Brandon Woodruff for the offense of capital murder for the deaths of Norma and Dennis Woodruff. Jeffrey T. Collins, affiant, subscribed and sworn before me on this, the 24th day of October A.D. 2005, Kenneth Peters, Magistrate, Hunt County, Texas.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC. Your host is Scott Pogensey, and your writer is C. Derick Miller. The theme music for the American Justice Podcast has been created and composed by Josh DeRosa. Scripted and recorded episodes are published every Sunday morning, with follow-up Q&A episodes released on Fridays. You can find the Q&A episodes on YouTube by searching for American Justice Podcast. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First, and most preferred, is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and the city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you would like to blog about the show, then you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and tell us what you think there. If you are a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter at @AJusticePodcast. If you would like to support the show, you can do so in a couple different ways. First, consider visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/AJPodcast. We have different levels of support that include t-shirts, guest call-in spots, and early access to our podcast and YouTube shows. Next, you can like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notifications of when we publish episodes. We would also very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review. If you have any comments about the show, or more importantly, any tips on the case we're discussing, please call 972-942-0444 and leave us a message. After all, if the subject of our podcast is innocent, that means someone out there is guilty. American Justice Army? Let's find them.